Welcome to Unveiled Confessions, where the most raw and shocking confessions are revealed. I'm pushing for 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
I met this guy on a random dating app. He looked normal. Average photos, not overly edited, just enough to seem like someone who had a life. He was smiling in every picture, holding a coffee in one, a dog in another, and the way he wrote was kind of funny, not too dry. I wasn't expecting much from it, just a chill meetup to pass time, maybe go for a walk and talk. I didn't think anything weird would happen. He suggested we go to this local park near the lake. It wasn't far from my area and I'd been there before, so I thought it was fine. It was late afternoon when we met, the kind of daylight that's starting to fade but still bright enough to see everything clearly. He greeted me with a small wave and a big grin. He looked the same as his pictures, maybe a bit more awkward in person but still fine. We started walking along the path talking about random things, movies, jobs, how we both hated small talk. He laughed a lot, like everything I said was hilarious, and honestly it put me at ease for a bit. The park wasn't crowded, just a few people walking dogs or jogging. The lake reflected the orange sky, and everything had that calm early evening vibe. At some point he said he needed to go toilet. I pointed towards the public restrooms near the playground, but he said he didn't like using those. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and told him he'd have to hold it until we left. He nodded, but then kept walking like he was looking for somewhere else. I didn't think much of it. A few minutes later, we were near this open area surrounded by trees. He suddenly stopped, looked around, and said, "I'll be quick." Before I could ask what he meant, he just unzipped his pants right there in the middle of the park and started peeing. I froze. At first, I thought maybe he was kidding, like he'd pretend and laugh, but no, he was actually doing it. Just standing there, acting like it was normal. I turned away immediately, pretending to check my phone, pretending I didn't see anything. My brain was just trying to make sense of it. Like maybe he had some kind of medical problem or was drunk or something. I didn't smell alcohol though. It was so quiet that I could hear the sound of it hitting the grass, and it made me feel sick. When he was done, he zipped up and came over like nothing happened. He said something about the park being peaceful and how he liked nature. I just nodded, trying not to make it a thing. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know how to do it without making it weird. I kept walking and talking less, hoping he'd get the hint. A few minutes passed and then he stopped again. This time his expression changed. He said, "I think I need to poo now." I just looked at him, completely thrown off. I said there were toilets back near the parking area. He looked around again, shaking his head like that wasn't an option. Then before I could say anything else, he started walking toward a small group of bushes off the path. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He walked a few steps in, turned his back to me, and then crouched down into a full squat. I was just standing there, completely frozen. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and every second felt longer than it should. I could hear him breathing and muttering to himself. That's when I knew I needed to go. I didn't say anything. I just started walking fast toward the exit, pretending to check my phone like I had somewhere to be. My hands were shaking. I kept expecting him to call out or follow me, but he didn't. I reached the main gate, got in my car, and just sat there for a few seconds trying to process what just happened. It felt unreal, like something you'd read about online and laugh at, except it wasn't funny. It was disturbing. When I got home, I blocked him immediately. I didn't even want to message my friends about it at first because it sounded too bizarre to explain. Like, how do you even say, "Yeah, my date decided to relieve himself in the middle of the park"? A few hours later, he actually texted me saying he had a good time and hoped to see me again. I stared at the message for a while, not knowing whether to laugh or feel sick. He genuinely thought that was okay. That was the worst part. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't apologizing. It was like none of it was strange to him. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, the chat, everything. But for a few days after, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, what if I hadn't left? What if he'd done something worse? It wasn't just gross. It was like a total lack of awareness, no boundaries, no sense of normal human behavior. A week later, I saw his profile again, still active, still posting pictures like nothing ever happened. Same dog, same coffee photos. The caption under one of them said something about enjoying peaceful walks at the park. I don't know why, but that part creeped me out more than anything else. I deleted the app after that. I figured anyone who could act that casually about something so insane didn't belong on there. The whole thing left this weird mark in my brain, like a reminder of how you never really know what's behind someone's smile or profile picture. Even now, months later, every time someone suggests a walk in the park for a first date, I say no. I just can't. The memory's too vivid. That open space, the silence, the sound of him saying, "I'll be quick," is stuck there like a bad scene on repeat. I met her online, the kind of girl who always had a filter on her photos but not too much to make it fake. She had that friendly energy, sending long voice notes about random things like food and her cat, so when she said she loved amusement parks, I thought it sounded fun. I hadn't been on a proper day out like that in years. I figured it'd be something lighthearted, maybe a good memory. It was a bright Saturday, the kind where everything feels too loud. Kids were screaming, people were queuing for rides, popcorn smells everywhere. She showed up in ripped jeans and a pink hoodie, holding a huge iced coffee. She was chatty, kept laughing at small things, and I thought, alright, this might actually go well. We bought wristbands, took a few pictures at the entrance, and started walking around trying to decide what to do first. The first few rides were fine. She screamed louder than everyone, and it made me laugh. She'd cling to my arm when something spun too fast, then laugh it off like nothing happened. It felt normal, like how dates are supposed to go when you're still figuring someone out. I started to think maybe she was the type that could make anything fun. Then, right in the middle of the walkway near the Ferris wheel, she froze. I followed her eyes and saw some guy walking with another girl. She stared at him like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't even have time to ask before she waved and started walking over. I stayed where I was, a few steps behind, watching her talk to him with this weird mix of excitement and tension. The other girl stood next to him, clearly confused. When she came back, she looked awkward for a second and said that the guy was her ex. She said they hadn't talked in a while but ended on good terms. I just nodded because what else was I supposed to do? Then, before I could think, she said they all agreed we should hang out together since we were all already here. I wanted to say no, but she already started walking back toward them. So now it's the four of us. Me, her ex, and his new girl. It felt like some kind of messed up double date that no one planned. I tried to stay cool, acting like it didn't bother me, but it did. The energy was off right away. Her ex was tall, confident, had that kind of presence where everyone seemed to look at him. The new girl seemed nice but quiet, probably thinking the same thing I was, that this was uncomfortable as hell. We went on a few rides together, and I noticed quickly that she and her ex kept talking, laughing, sharing little looks. They'd stand next to each other every time, while me and the other girl were just tagging along like extras. At one point, when we got off the roller coaster, she grabbed his arm while she was laughing about something, and I just stared at the ground pretending not to care. It only got worse after that. Every time I tried to start a conversation, she'd zone out and turn to him. They had inside jokes, references to places they'd been, songs they used to listen to. I could see his girlfriend noticing it too. She'd stand there, smiling politely, but her eyes looked empty. I started feeling embarrassed, like I was the one intruding on something I didn't understand. There was a moment that made my stomach drop. We were waiting in line for the haunted house ride. The line was slow, the air smelled like old popcorn and damp pavement. She and her ex were standing close, whispering about something, and then she leaned her head against his shoulder for a second. Not long enough for it to be obvious, but long enough for both me and his girlfriend to notice. The girl he was with glanced at me, and I could tell she was thinking the same thing. I looked away because I didn't know what to say. I wasn't even mad, just kind of numb. I kept telling myself to play it cool, get through the day and leave quietly. But it was one of those situations where every ride, every laugh, every fake smile just made me want to disappear. On the Ferris wheel they sat together. The seats could only hold two, so I ended up with his girlfriend. She didn't say much. She just sighed and said something about how weird the day felt. I nodded. When the wheel reached the top, I looked down at them. I could see her leaning close to him again, and that was the point where I knew the date was over for me. Not officially, but mentally. After that, things fell apart fast. When we got off, I said I was going to grab a drink. She said she'd join me, but then got distracted talking to him again. I didn't wait. I walked toward the exit, pretending to check my phone, pretending I wasn't furious and humiliated. I left without saying anything, just walked straight to the parking lot and sat in my car for a bit. A few hours later, she texted me. She said she didn't mean to make me feel weird and that it was nice bumping into old memories. That line annoyed me more than anything. I didn't reply. The next morning, she posted pictures from the amusement park. In one of them, she was standing next to her ex, both smiling, both tagged. That's when I realized she probably planned half of it. Maybe she knew he'd be there, maybe she didn't, but either way, it didn't matter. The day had turned into some awkward flashback for her and a humiliation for me. After that, I didn't go on any amusement park dates again. Something about the noise, the fake laughter, the smell of candy and metal just made me feel sick. It all reminded me of that day, standing there like a background character while someone replayed their old love story right in front of me. It started like a normal first date. I'd matched with him on a random app after a few dry conversations with other guys that went nowhere. He was funny over messages, quick replies, confident but not too much. He asked me out after a few days and said he knew this chill restaurant that had the best food. I agreed, thinking it'd be a decent way to spend a Friday night. I didn't overthink it. When I got there, I saw him outside the restaurant with two other guys. He waved at me and said they were his friends who had just tagged along. At first, I thought maybe they were just giving him a lift or something, but no, they followed us inside like they were part of the plan. I didn't really know what to do, so I just went with it. I told myself maybe it'd be fun, like a group thing, not just pressure from a one-on-one. I was wrong. The moment we sat down, I could tell it wasn't going to be what I expected. The three of them were already laughing loudly, making jokes about everything and barely paying attention to me. Every time I tried to join in, they'd make side comments or smirk at each other like they had their own inside jokes. It was awkward. I laughed along just to not seem uptight, but it felt forced. The restaurant wasn't even busy, so it made the whole thing stand out more. We were in this corner booth and the lighting was warm but kind of dim. I could see our reflection in the window, them leaning toward each other, whispering and snickering, me sitting on the edge of the seat trying to look relaxed. The waiter came over and handed us menus, and they started ordering like they'd been there 100 times. One of them made a comment about how small the portions looked, and another joked about how I probably only ordered salads. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother me, but it did. They kept calling the waiter mate in this loud, fake-friendly way, and I could tell the staff were already annoyed. My date didn't do much to stop it. He just joined in, egging them on like it was all harmless fun. I tried to steer the conversation toward normal topics, but it never worked. They'd twist everything I said into something stupid or laugh at it. When I said I liked horror movies, one of them mocked me, asking if I slept with the lights on. When I said I worked part-time, they made a joke about me probably using my tips to pay for this meal. My date laughed at that one the most. Food came and they started eating like they hadn't eaten in days. Talking with their mouths full, arguing about whose food looked better, making fun of each other loudly. I just sat there trying to not look as uncomfortable as I felt. I was embarrassed, honestly. People at other tables were glancing over. They ordered drinks too, multiple rounds. Every time, they'd cheers and make some stupid comment about how this was boys' night plus guest. I was the guest, apparently. My date barely looked at me unless it was to make a joke at my expense. When the food was nearly done, one of them said he needed to go toilet. The others laughed and said they'd go too. I thought nothing of it. Guys go to the toilet together all the time, right? They got up, still laughing, pushing each other playfully like kids, and walked toward the back. I remember watching them disappear past the kitchen door. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The waiter came over, smiling politely, and asked if I wanted dessert or the bill. I said I'd wait for my group to come back. He nodded and left, but the look on his face said he already knew. I texted my date asking if everything was okay. No reply. I waited another few minutes before checking the toilets myself. Empty. I went outside, no sign of them. That's when I knew what they'd done. They'd left. All of them. The waiter came back with the bill. It wasn't cheap. Between all the food and drinks, it came up to over $120. I sat there staring at the receipt, my heart sinking. I told him they'd gone to the toilet and hadn't come back, and he just nodded like it wasn't the first time he'd heard that. I could feel people at nearby tables watching, probably figuring out what had happened. I didn't have enough cash on me, only my card, and paying that much for people I didn't even know felt like a joke. But what could I do? I wasn't about to cause a scene. I paid. I smiled awkwardly at the waiter and left, pretending it didn't bother me, but inside I felt this mix of anger and humiliation I'd never felt before. Outside, the night air hit me and I just stood there for a while. I kept checking my phone, hoping maybe he'd message saying it was a misunderstanding, that they'd gone somewhere and were coming back. Nothing. Just silence. When I got home, I saw a message on his profile, a new story. It was a photo of him and his friends, all laughing at another restaurant, captioned something like, "Never a dull night." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. It wasn't just about the money. It was the way they planned it. The way they laughed and joked like it was all entertainment while I sat there trying to be polite. I blocked him after that. The restaurant called the next day because one of the waiters had found my number on the booking and wanted to confirm payment, probably to make sure I wasn't part of the scam. I told them I paid and that the people I was with left. They apologized, but it didn't really help. For a while after, I stopped meeting people from apps. Every time someone suggested going out for food, I get this weird feeling in my stomach. The sound of guys laughing too loudly in a restaurant still makes me tense up. It's like a reflex. It wasn't scary in a horror movie way, but it was disturbing in a real one, being tricked like that, surrounded by laughter that you realize was never friendly. Just mean. Just fake. It started weird before it even started. I met her through a friend of a friend online and we'd been messaging for a week. She seemed chill, funny, and a bit blunt, which I didn't mind. She sent normal selfies. Nothing crazy, nothing filtered. When she asked to meet for coffee, I said sure. It was supposed to be casual, nothing deep, just two people seeing if there was something there. I got to the cafe first. It was one of those places that tries to look fancy but isn't, with too many plants and wooden chairs that wobble. I remember scrolling through my phone, checking if she texted that she was on her way. Then she walked in and my brain sort of froze for a second. She looked like she was pregnant. Not like slightly bloated or heavy, I mean actually pregnant. Round stomach, the kind that sticks out even through a hoodie. She smiled and waved like everything was normal. I stood up, still processing what I was seeing. She came over, sat down, and acted completely casual. I waited for her to say something, anything to explain it, but she didn't. She started talking about her morning, how bad traffic was, how she almost didn't come because her Uber driver missed the turn. I tried to focus, but all I could think was, she's pregnant. When the waiter came, she ordered a caramel latte and a sandwich. I just got a coffee because honestly, I wasn't even sure what to say. At some point, I asked if she was okay because she seemed a little tired, and she laughed and said she was just bloated lately. Bloated. She said it with this straight face like she genuinely believed it, like we weren't both looking at a full belly in front of us. I just nodded slowly and changed the subject because I didn't want to make it awkward. The conversation was off. She'd start telling a story and stop halfway, then zone out and rub her stomach absent-mindedly. When she caught me noticing, she'd quickly fold her arms. Every few minutes, she'd mention being hungry or craving random stuff. She even asked if the cafe had pickles, which it didn't. I tried to make small talk, asked about her job, her hobbies, all that. She said she used to work in retail but quit recently because she wasn't feeling too well lately. Then she started talking about how her stomach had been weird for weeks, but her doctor said it was nothing serious. She said it so casually that I almost doubted what I was seeing. About 20 minutes in, she winced mid-sentence. I thought maybe it was a cramp, but she brushed it off and kept talking. A few minutes later, it happened again. She grabbed the edge of the table and took a deep breath. I asked if she wanted water and she said she was fine, just bloated pains. Then she laughed nervously and said she probably shouldn't have eaten so much breakfast. It kept happening though. Every few minutes, her face would tense up. The waiter even noticed and asked if she was all right. She smiled through it, saying she just had stomach issues. I was sitting there trying to figure out how to politely end the date without sounding like a jerk. Then it happened, the sound. A small splash under the table. I looked down and saw a puddle forming near her shoes. For a second, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then she froze and looked at me, her face pale. The cafe went quiet. A few people looked over and the waiter just stopped mid-step holding a tray. I knew instantly what had happened. Her water broke. On a first date. She kept saying she was fine, but her breathing got faster. I stood up and asked if she needed to go to the hospital. She finally nodded, looking terrified. I helped her up, grabbed her bag and told the staff we had to go. They didn't even try to stop us, just stared as we rushed out. I got her in my car and started driving to the nearest hospital. The whole time she was gripping the seat, breathing heavily, repeating that it wasn't supposed to happen today. I didn't even know what to say. I was just praying I'd get there fast enough. She started crying halfway there, saying she hadn't told anyone because she didn't want to deal with judgment. She said she'd been ignoring it, pretending it wasn't real. When we got to the hospital, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair and took her inside. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. They asked if I was the father and I quickly said no, just a friend. But she turned her head and said my name. She told them I was with her. Everyone just assumed I was involved somehow. They wheeled her away and I sat in the waiting room, staring at the floor, trying to process what just happened. People kept coming in and out, calling names while I sat there still in shock. After about 40 minutes, a nurse came out and asked if I was waiting for her. I said yeah. The nurse smiled and said both mother and baby were doing fine. Then she said the girl wanted to see me. I didn't want to, but I felt like I had to. When I walked into the room, she was holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, smiling weakly. Her face was pale, her hair stuck to her forehead, but she looked calm. I stood awkwardly by the door, unsure what to say. Then she said she named the baby after me. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She said it slowly with this tired but serious tone. I felt this cold wave go through me. It didn't make sense. I barely knew her. I'd met her 2 hours ago. I just stood there speechless. The nurse smiled like it was sweet, not realizing how insane it was. I mumbled something about being glad she was okay and left. I sat in my car for what felt like forever before driving home. Later that night, she texted me. She said thank you for helping her, and she sent a picture of the baby. She repeated the name. I didn't reply. I blocked her number and deleted everything. A week later, a friend of mine sent me a link to a local news post about a woman who had given birth unexpectedly in a cafe. The photo was her, smiling with the baby, and the article mentioned the baby's name, mine. I didn't even click the full story. I just stared at the name printed under the photo, feeling sick. I matched with him on a Sunday night, one of those boring ones where you're scrolling just to pass time. His profile looked normal. Nice pictures, good smile, older but not too old. He said he was in his late 30s, worked in finance, and had recently moved back to my area after years away. He had that confident way of talking that makes you think he actually knows what he's doing with his life. We talked for a few days and he was really charming, like he knew exactly what to say to make a girl laugh. He asked me out for dinner that Friday. He picked a quiet restaurant, not a chain, just some local spot that looked fancy but not too much. I said sure, thinking it'd be one of those dates where you just eat, talk, and go home with either a good or bad story. I didn't expect it to become something I still can't even fully explain without feeling weird about it. When I got there, he was already sitting at a table near the window. I recognized him instantly from his photos, though he looked a little older in person. More wrinkles around his eyes, gray streaks in his hair. Still, he looked decent, dressed well, calm smile, polite. I sat down and we started talking like normal. He asked about my week, my job, my hobbies, all the small talk stuff. I remember thinking he had a very familiar way of speaking, like something about his tone or phrasing sounded weirdly close to home. It was fine at first. He was funny, respectful, kept the conversation going. He told me about living abroad and traveling for work. But halfway through the date, something started to feel off. Every time I mentioned something personal, my family, the area I grew up in, my dad, his face would twitch a little. Like he was recognizing something but pretending not to. At one point, I mentioned my dad's name by accident while telling a story about when I was a kid. He paused for a second, then laughed in this low way that didn't match the moment. I didn't think too much of it, but after that, he kept asking oddly specific questions. Stuff like which school I went to, what my parents did, where I used to live. It started feeling less like small talk and more like an interrogation. When the food came, I noticed he kept looking at me. Not in a flirty way, but more like he was studying my face. I asked him if something was wrong and he said no, he just thought I looked familiar. I laughed awkwardly and said maybe we'd crossed paths before, but inside, something about that comment made me uneasy. The conversation turned strange after that. He started steering it toward things that sounded too personal. He mentioned my area again and said he used to visit someone who lived nearby. Then he said he'd known a man years ago who had a daughter around my age. The way he said it made my skin crawl a little. It didn't sound like a random comment. I tried to move the topic, asked him about his travels again, but he didn't seem interested anymore. He leaned forward and looked at me with this unsettling half smile and said I reminded him of someone he used to know very well. I laughed it off, said I get that a lot, but inside I was starting to panic. The weirdest part came when he mentioned my dad's job again, but this time he got it exactly right. Like not a vague guess, but word for word. I froze. I asked how he knew that, and he said something like he'd met someone years ago with that same name. He didn't sound unsure though. He sounded like he already knew the answer. I told him my dad's first name again, this time with his last name, and his face changed completely. He leaned back, his smile fading, like I'd just confirmed something he already suspected. Then he said he used to know my dad a long time ago. That's when it clicked in my head. He started describing memories, old ones from when I was a kid. Things I didn't even think anyone outside my family remembered. He talked about helping my parents move into their old house, about a barbecue we had when I was maybe 4 or 5. Every word felt heavier, like he was peeling back something I didn't want touched. My stomach dropped when he said my full name out loud, slowly, like he was testing it. Then he smiled again and said he'd known me since I was born. My mind went blank. I asked what he meant and he said he was my godfather. I couldn't even process it at first. I thought he was joking. But then he started saying names of family members, inside jokes, stories from when I was little, things only someone close to my family would know. I felt sick. I asked him why he was on a dating app pretending to be someone else, and he said he'd made the profile just to see what was out there. Then he added that he'd recognized me right after we matched but didn't say anything because he wanted to see how I turned out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He said it so casually, like it wasn't one of the most disturbing things someone could say on a first date. My hands were shaking under the table. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't move for a second. The idea that I had been chatting and flirting with someone who'd known me since I was a child made my stomach twist. I finally stood up and said I had to go. He didn't try to stop me, just sat there watching me with that same half smile. As I walked out, I felt his eyes on my back the whole time. I didn't look back once. When I got home, I blocked him instantly and sat on my bed just staring at the wall. I felt violated without even being touched. I called my dad the next day and asked if he remembered the guy. He said yeah, they used to be close years ago, but they hadn't spoken in over a decade. My dad said he'd lost touch and didn't know what happened to him. I didn't tell my dad about the date. I couldn't. Just the thought of explaining how that happened made me feel sick. I deleted the app, deleted everything, and didn't go on another date for months. Sometimes I still think about that night. The way he smiled when he said my name. The way he'd already known who I was from the start. It wasn't a normal kind of fear, it was the kind that sticks because you realize someone had been watching, waiting, pretending. I thought it would be a fun first date idea. Something chill, nothing fancy, no pressure to sit across a table and force conversation. Mini golf seemed like the kind of harmless, playful thing people did when they didn't want awkward silence. I'd been talking to this girl online for about 2 weeks and she seemed cool. She liked memes, music, and said she had a competitive streak but in a fun way. That didn't sound like a red flag at the time. We met at this outdoor mini golf course just outside the city. It was one of those places with fake waterfalls, neon balls, and loud families everywhere. She was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance with her hands behind her back. She looked normal enough, jeans, hoodie, big smile. Then I noticed something sticking out of her hoodie pocket, a silver metal measuring tape, the kind builders use. I thought maybe she had it for work or something. When I got closer, she pulled it out, flicked the metal part, and said she was ready. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her face was dead serious. She said she liked to play properly and didn't like when people just hit and hope. I thought she was exaggerating, so I went along with it. Paid for 2 rounds, got our clubs and balls, and walked to the first hole. Right from the start, she crouched down next to the ball, squinting at it like she was studying a crime scene. She pulled out the measuring tape and extended it from her ball to the hole, mumbling numbers under her breath. Then she started tapping the ground with her fingers to check how even the surface was. Everyone around us was watching. I tried to laugh it off, saying we could just play casually, but she waved her hand at me to be quiet so she could focus. When she finally took her first shot, she missed by about an inch. She didn't smile or laugh. She got down on her knees, tape measure out again, measuring the angle of her miss like it was a professional tournament. A family waiting behind us started whispering. I felt my face heating up. I told her it was fine, just go again, but she shook her head and said it had to be done right. By the second hole, she was in full competition mode. She had a small notebook she'd brought in her bag, and after each shot, she'd write down notes. Numbers, scribbles, symbols I didn't even understand. I stood there holding my club, pretending to be entertained, but inside I was dying of embarrassment. Every hole took her at least 5 minutes because she'd remeasure the angle every time. At one point, a group of teenagers behind us started laughing, and I can't even blame them. She was flat on the ground, face almost touching the turf, lining up her shot like she was playing real golf. I tried to speed things up, suggesting we skip a few holes, but she refused. She said skipping would ruin the rhythm. Then she started getting irritated whenever I hit better than her. I wasn't even trying that hard, but she'd frown and start mumbling about how the wind must have changed or the turf was uneven. At hole 7, she accused me of moving her ball when she wasn't looking. I hadn't touched anything. She marched back, measured the distance again, and said it didn't match what she'd written in her notebook. I told her maybe she measured wrong the first time. That was the wrong thing to say. She glared at me like I'd insulted her family. It only got worse from there. She started taking practice swings before every shot. Full warm-ups. She'd stand there swinging the club back and forth, adjusting her stance, doing deep breaths. A kid walked by and asked his dad if she was a real golfer. The dad just shrugged. I wanted the ground to open up. At hole 9, she got down on all fours again, measuring the slope of the hill leading to the cup. People walking past were openly staring now. I tried to make a joke to lighten the mood, saying maybe she should bring a level next time. She didn't laugh. She looked at me like I was being disrespectful. By the time we reached hole 12, I wanted to disappear. She was sweating, muttering numbers to herself. using her phone's flashlight to check for dips in the fake grass. I stood there pretending to check my phone while she was on her knees again, measuring the width of the ramp. I could feel people's eyes on us from every direction. A kid even asked if she worked there. When she missed an easy shot, she slammed her club on the ground so hard the ball jumped. I thought she might actually storm off, but no. She started measuring again, saying something about inconsistency. I didn't even know what that meant in mini golf. When we finally got to the last hole, I was silently begging for it to end. She measured every inch of that final shot, then hit the ball too hard and missed completely. She just stood there staring at it for a long time, breathing heavily. Then she turned to me and said she wanted to redo the whole course because the lighting was off earlier. That's when I told her I had to go. She looked disappointed, like I was quitting halfway through something important. She tried to convince me to stay for a rematch, saying she could do better if she adjusted her calculations. I mumbled something about having somewhere to be and walked toward the parking lot as fast as I could. As I got to my car, she yelled after me asking for my scorecard so she could log the stats. I just waved and kept walking. I drove off without even turning on the radio. I sat there in silence for a bit, trying to process what I'd just lived through. Later that night, she texted me a full breakdown of our scores, color-coded with graphs. She said she wanted to compare our accuracy percentages next time. I didn't reply. I blocked her the next day. I'll never look at mini golf the same again. Every time I pass by one, I remember her on her knees in the middle of the course, tape measure stretched across the turf, treating it like a science project. It wasn't even scary in the usual way, it was just one of those things that burned into your brain because of how weirdly specific and uncomfortable it was. Started out normal. We matched on an app after a few days of casual swiping. His profile seemed fine, clean-cut guy, smiled in all his photos, worked in marketing, had a dog. Nothing strange stood out. His messages were polite, kind of old-fashioned, but I didn't think much of it. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee one weekend, and since he didn't come across like a creep, I said sure. The cafe he picked was quiet, a little hipster place near the river. I got there first, and a few minutes later he walked in. He looked exactly like his photos, maybe even better. He had that calm kind of presence, the kind that makes you feel like everything's going to go smoothly. I thought it'd be a comfortable date, one of those simple ones where you just talk and see if there's anything there. He greeted me politely, sat down, and we started chatting about random things. The conversation flowed easily at first. He asked about my work, my family, what I like to do. He told me about his job, his dog, and how he'd recently moved back home for a bit to help his mom out. Sounded wholesome. He laughed a lot, seemed shy but sweet, and kept thanking me for meeting him. Everything felt normal until about 15 minutes in. Something about the way he talked changed, like his energy shifted. He looked nervous suddenly, like he was about to confess something. His hands were fidgeting, and he kept glancing out the window before finally blurting something out. It wasn't loud, but it stopped me mid-sip. He told me he didn't actually like girls. Just like that. No build-up. My brain needed a second to catch up. He said it in this quiet, honest voice, like he wasn't embarrassed but more tired. I just stared at him, unsure what to say. Then he kept going. He said he liked men. Always had. I thought maybe he was joking or trying to make a weird point, but no, he was dead serious. Before I could react, he said the reason he was on the date was because his mom thought this might help him change. That word, change, stuck in my head. He said his mom had been worried and suggested he should try dating a woman properly to see if it would fix things. The way he said it was almost casual, like it wasn't insane. He smiled awkwardly and said he thought he should at least try it to make her happy. I didn't even know how to respond. I think I just blinked for a while, trying to process what he was saying. He kept talking, almost apologizing, but not really. He said he felt bad for misleading me but wanted to be honest. He told me he didn't expect anything romantic to happen. He just needed to prove to his mom that he gave it a shot. The whole time, I was sitting there clutching my coffee cup like it was going to save me. People were chatting around us, laughing, ordering drinks, and I was just sitting across from a guy who basically told me I was part of his mom's weird experiment. Then it got worse. He said he'd shown his mom my profile before we met. He said she picked me out. Apparently, she thought I looked like the kind of girl who could set him straight. He said it with this nervous laugh, like he knew how messed up it sounded but didn't know how to stop talking. I could feel the heat rising in my face. It wasn't anger at first, it was this strange embarrassment. I was literally part of a stranger's plan to cure her son. He said his mom had even helped him pick what to wear for the date. That made it worse. I pictured some older woman ironing his shirt and saying things like, Just try to like her. I wanted to leave, but he looked so awkward and broken sitting there that I froze. He started talking about how hard it had been for him, how his mom didn't accept who he really was. He said he wasn't proud of lying to me, but he didn't know how else to make her stop pestering him. He said she threatened to stop speaking to him if he didn't at least try to date a girl. He told me she drove him to the cafe and said she'd be waiting nearby in her car to ask how it went afterward. That was when I felt this wave of discomfort so strong I almost laughed from the absurdity. Somewhere outside, his mom was sitting in a car, waiting for a report on whether her son was fixed. He looked genuinely torn up about it, like he was stuck between pleasing his mom and being himself. He said he wanted to tell her the truth but didn't have the guts. He thought maybe if this date went well it would calm her down for a bit. I tried to act calm, but inside I was dying to leave. The air in the cafe suddenly felt heavy, like everyone could hear us. I nodded along, said it was fine even though it wasn't. I just wanted the date to end. He looked at me and said I was really kind for not walking out. He said he didn't expect anyone to understand. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled awkwardly. He started talking about how he felt bad about lying to people on dating apps. Apparently, I wasn't the first girl he'd met like this. He said he'd done this twice before but couldn't go through with it. Every word made my stomach twist. I started feeling this weird pity for him mixed with discomfort. It wasn't that he was mean or creepy, it was that I wasn't supposed to be there at all. I was part of someone else's family problem, sitting across from a guy who didn't even like me in the way a date was supposed to mean. When the bill came, he insisted on paying, saying it was the least he could do for wasting my time. I told him it was fine, but he said he felt guilty enough already. After we left the cafe, he walked me to my car. He said his mom would probably ask a million questions, so he needed to go back and tell her something that wouldn't start another fight. I told him to take care and got in my car fast. As I was leaving, I saw him walking toward a silver car parked nearby. An older woman was sitting inside, leaning forward like she was watching us. I didn't stick around long enough to see what happened next. That night, I got a message from him. He thanked me again for being understanding and said his mom thought I seemed lovely. He said she asked if there'd be a second date. I blocked him right after that. I don't even tell this story much because people never believe how strange it was. It wasn't scary in a typical way, but it messed with me. Just knowing that someone had used me to prove something to their parent, that I'd unknowingly been part of a fake experiment, made me feel weird for weeks. Every time I pass that cafe now, I still picture him sitting there, trying to convince himself that a coffee date could somehow change who he was. It started like any normal date setup. I matched with her late one night after work. Her pictures looked good, mid-20s maybe, nice smile, hair done up, nothing that screamed fake. She messaged first, which already made her stand out. She was confident, funny, and really direct. She said she liked mature guys who didn't play games, and I thought that was ironic since she looked pretty young. We talked for a few days, mostly about food, music, and random stuff. She said she loved trying new restaurants and asked if I wanted to meet somewhere fancy for our first date. She picked a nice Italian place downtown. I didn't mind, it sounded better than another boring coffee shop meetup. The day of the date, I got there early. The place had low lighting, soft music, and couples everywhere. I texted her to say I was at the table, and she replied saying she'd be there in a few minutes. I ordered water and tried not to look awkward waiting alone. When she walked in, my brain didn't process it at first. I recognized the outfit. It matched one of her photos, but the person wearing it wasn't the same girl from the pictures. The woman walking toward me was older. Much older. Like not even close to the photo older. Her hair was shorter, her skin looked weathered, and she moved slower. I remember blinking a few times, thinking maybe it was her mom dropping something off or something. Then she smiled and said my name. I froze. That's when it hit me, it was her. The same person I'd been talking to all week, except the photos were at least 20 years old. She sat down like nothing was wrong and started chatting as if we'd known each other for years. I couldn't even form words at first. She noticed how quiet I was and said she knew she looked different in person. She said she'd used old photos because she missed that version of herself. I just nodded, trying not to look too shocked. She didn't even seem embarrassed. She laughed and said everyone lies a little online, and that she just wanted to feel young again. The waiter came over and she ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. She ordered wine too, expensive wine, and told the waiter to bring a bottle. It felt weird, like she'd done this 100 times before. Once he left, she leaned in and started talking more. She said she hadn't been on a date in years. She said she used to go out a lot when she was younger, and that people used to tell her she had this energy that drew everyone in. Now she said she felt invisible. She kept saying how good it felt to have someone young and kind sitting across from her again. It wasn't even what she said, it was how she said it. Like she'd rehearsed it. She'd stare at me for a little too long, smile a little too wide, touch my hand every time she made a point. I just kept sipping my water, pretending everything was fine. The food came, but I couldn't even eat. She kept talking, telling me about her old relationships, how she'd been divorced twice, how men her age didn't appreciate her anymore. She said younger men were more open-minded. Then she said she didn't expect anything romantic from me, she just wanted company. That word stuck in my head, company. I tried to laugh it off and said I didn't really know what to say to that. She said she could make it worth my time. That's when she reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. She slid it across the table like it was totally normal. I didn't touch it. She said it was just a small thank you for coming out tonight. I told her she didn't need to do that, but she insisted. She said she liked to take care of people who made her feel alive. I remember staring at that envelope and feeling completely out of place. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be flattered or creeped out. She leaned in closer and said she'd been lonely since her divorce and wanted someone to make her feel young again. She said she could help me out financially if I helped her, emotionally. At that point, I didn't even know where to look. The waiter came back to check on us and I almost felt relieved. I asked for the bill, but she waved him off and said it was handled. She told me to relax, that she'd pay for everything. The way she said it made my skin crawl a bit. It wasn't the normal "I've got it" tone, it sounded like a deal being made. She kept talking about how she could buy me nice things, take me on trips, and spoil me. She said she used to have someone before, but it ended because he didn't know how to handle the lifestyle. I just nodded, pretending to listen while trying to figure out how to leave without being rude. When the bill came, she handed the waiter a black card without even looking at the total. She smiled at me like she was showing off. Then she asked if I wanted to go somewhere else, maybe a rooftop bar. I said I was tired and had an early morning. She looked disappointed but said she understood. Before I could leave, she made me take the envelope. I didn't want to argue in public, so I slipped it into my jacket. Outside, she hugged me tight like we were close. I stood stiff, not sure how to react. She whispered that she'd message me later and that she had big plans for us. I smiled awkwardly, said goodnight, and walked away as fast as I could. When I got home, I opened the envelope. It had $300 in cash. No note, no explanation, just money. My phone buzzed a minute later. It was her. She sent a message saying she hoped I'd had fun and that she wanted to see me again soon. She added a wink emoji and a heart. I didn't reply. I blocked her number and deleted the app that night. But what freaked me out most came 2 days later. I got an email from her. Somehow, she found my full name through my social media link. She said she still thought about our date and wanted to send me a gift. She said she already had my address because she'd looked it up when she wanted to make sure I was real. That line made my stomach drop. She'd actually searched for me before the date. I didn't reply, didn't confirm anything, just deleted the message. For the next week, I kept checking outside my window at night, half expecting to see her car parked somewhere. Luckily, she never showed up. Every now and then, I still think about how confident she was, like she'd done it before, meeting younger guys, paying them, trying to relive something that was long gone. It wasn't a normal kind of creepy. It was the kind that sticks because it felt real. Not some crazy stranger in an alley, just someone lonely enough to pretend they were someone else and rich enough to make it believable.